Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another post-game reaction show. What a game for the Lakers, the Nick Smith Jr. game. I did not have Bronny James and Nick Smith Jr. closing a crunch time win over the Portland Trailblazers on my bingo card tonight, but that is exactly what happened. The Lakers won their fourth straight game to improve to 6-2 on the season. We have a lot to touch on, but before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the late night gang. Shout out to the chat. And if you guys can't tell, based on my voice, I have not gotten better since last night. I've actually gotten worse. So I am going to do my best to stick to the 1 hour mark tonight. I do need some rest so I can continue to create content the rest of the week. But we have a lot to touch on, and I appreciate you guys all tuning in. So let's get into it. My overarching thought is I think it's a basic and obvious one at this point, but the Lakers are just a really, really good basketball team. And we've talked about it before. For various reasons, the Lakers were underrated going into the season. And a lot of people had them 6th in the West, 7th in the West, 8th in the West. Some people had them missing the play-in altogether. And despite an array of injuries, an assortment of injuries to half the rotation at times to start this season, including, it's one thing if you're missing your 7th, 8th, and 9th men. It's another thing when you're missing your second best player for this entire this entire time. Luka missed 3 games, your best player, and then now Austin and Luka and LeBron were all out tonight. And for the Lakers to win this game, in a big topic, a big theme with a lot of my post-game shows has been the resilience from this group and just the problem solving. And despite, doesn't matter if you're down DeAndre Ayton, or if you're down Gabe Vincent and Marcus Smart, or if you're down Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves, the Lakers have been able to shapeshift and find ways to just hang around and keep it a game. And then tonight in the fourth quarter, out-executed Portland at a very high level, outscored them 38-33 in the third quarter and 33-29 in the fourth quarter. Just made a slew of big plays, and obviously the final score was not indicative of, they stretched that to 12 points, 14 points with a couple minutes left, and then Portland ended up slicing the lead in the back half. But I'm not you guys know I'm not a gambling person, right? But I will sometimes check the lines just to see what Vegas is thinking about a certain game. And going into this game, the Lakers were 9.5 point underdogs without Luka, without LeBron, without Austin Reeves. Second night of a back-to-back against a team that they just played shorthanded about a week ago and lost that game by 14. It was the most lopsided loss of the season. They could barely dribble the ball up the floor against Portland in that game. They could barely dribble the ball up the floor at times against Portland in this game. And it didn't matter because the Lakers, to spoil my stat of the night, which I'll touch on in a second, shot 58.8%, which was a season best shooting performance. And mind you, that's without their 3 best offensive players. It's just absurd. Like the just collection of talent that they have right now offensively, and the skill, and to have a guy like Nick Smith, who I will touch on a little bit more in a second, but to have Nick Smith come off the bench as a 2-way guard and drop 25 and 6. And of course, we know his history as a former first-round pick. He is probably more talented than the typical 2-way player and should probably be a back-end bench player on an NBA team. But he had not played anywhere close to this level. We saw some kernels of it in that Minnesota game where he dropped 8 points and started to look a little bit more comfortable, but he explodes for 25 points, 6 assists. You have Marcus Smart with 5 assists, and I thought doing a really good job running the offense. And I think if we track assist opportunities, I would assume Marcus Smart is closer to 10, 11, 12 assist opportunities tonight. Several times he fed guys who got fouled. Several times he fed guys who just missed shots for like high percentage looks. Like I thought Marcus Smart was definitely the guy who handled the press and the pressure from Portland's defense the best. But DeAndre Ayton, 29 and 10 in a revenge game, dealt with foul trouble, didn't matter. Had that emphatic alley-oop. Rui Hachimura could not miss, continues to just shoot the leather off the ball, 28 points, 10 for 15 shooting. Jake LaRavia on his 24th birthday, my twin, I guess, 11 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. Like he did a little bit of everything as he has, that's become, he's this utility player for the Lakers. And then Bronny also gave the Lakers some really important minutes off the bench. So just an all-around team effort. And on paper, this should have been a win for the Blazers. Like this is a group that entered this game 4-2. Their defense is tenacious. They are long. They are athletic. They can press you full court, as we saw to start the first quarter. In the third quarter, they turned the Lakers over a bunch of times. And like this is a group that is young and ascending in the West and could be a group that potentially is even a back end playoff team this year. If you told me, if we flash forward 6 months from now and Portland's a 7 or 8 seed, I wouldn't be like shocked at this point. I think they've looked the part. So this was just a really quality win. I feel like I keep coming on here and saying the win of the season. This is in that conversation. I still would, Memphis and Miami, especially with Luka coming back, I would maybe put one of those two slightly above. There's also the Minnesota game in Minnesota. Like the Lakers just have a bunch of quality wins. And that's really my point here is that I think we need to rethink the Lakers ceiling. And this is a group that right now is looking like at minimum a top 4 team in the West, if not potentially even a top 3 team in the West. And I think some people who had the Lakers pretty low in their preseason projections and even low as like last week need to rethink where they have the Lakers in the West hierarchy. And we've not even seen this group at full strength. And I know there's some doubt or skepticism as to how LeBron will fit in or how he will impact things. I remain bullish on arguably the greatest player of all time to find a way to positively, impact this group on both sides of the ball. So I think it's going to work out. I think it's going to be okay. And I think he's going to make the Lakers better on both sides of the ball. So we have not seen this group at their full potential yet. And they're already looking really, really good. And yes, there are some flaws. They continue to struggle against ball pressure. They can sometimes look aimless against zones. The defensive rebounding, the ball containment. Yes, there are certainly flaws. They continue to be, even tonight, it was a below average defensive performance per defensive rating. They're going to continue to be a below average defense, but the offense is humming at such a high level. And tonight was the ultimate test. No Luka, no Austin, no LeBron. Didn't matter. They still got high percentage looks throughout the game. And really, if they could find a way to get the ball into the half court, they typically got a pretty good shot and typically scored. So didn't shoot the ball well from 3, had a bunch of turnovers, didn't get to the free throw line, didn't matter. They just, they're an efficient machine in the half court. And even in transition, they got out in transition a bunch. Like just a really nice win for the Lakers. And again, I think this is, to me, just a statement, an early statement that this group doesn't matter who's in, who's out. They're connected. They're playing with joy. They're playing for one another. And offensively, I just don't really know how you guard or slow this group down. They will have some tests coming up. I think the OKC test in about 9 days is going to be the big one. But just a really, really good team. And I think people need to recalibrate how they view the Lakers. In terms of notable performers, I already touched on some of them, but to rattle it through, I think we got to start with Nick Smith Jr., 25 and 6. I'm going to save him for one of my takeaways, but I know technically he was 3rd on the team in scoring, but given who was available, you expected DeAndre Ayton and Rui Hachimura to step up. Ayton, 19 shots, Rui, 15 shots. You expected that, right? from an efficiency perspective, I think both guys were awesome. Ayton shot 74%, Rui shot 67%. So they probably exceeded expectations from that regard. But given who was available, I expected the offense to funnel more through Ayton and Rui. What I did not expect was for Nick Smith Jr. to drop 25 and 6 off the bench. And dare I say, shades of Jamal Crawford with some of those pull-ups. And he's obviously smaller, doesn't have the handle of Jamal Crawford. Very few players in NBA history have been able to match his handle. But something about the shot and sort of like the shake that he has, the way that he moves, also maybe like kind of the body type, similar body, similar frame to Jamal Crawford, just a couple inches shorter. But he hit so many big shots tonight and made so many big plays. And 10 for 15 overall, 5 for 6 on threes, several pull-up jumpers out of pick and rolls, and he was incredible tonight. And then I mentioned it, DeAndre Ayton, revenge game, 29 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 blocks. Dealt with foul trouble, had 5 fouls, and had to rest for about sit out half the fourth quarter. Didn't matter, came back in, and he was awesome. Ended up playing tonight, and like that probably was the swing factor of tonight. I don't know if they win this game if DeAndre Ayton sits out. And with the Lakers choosing to have Luka and Austin sit out, like going into the game, I was thinking, like, does it really make sense to have DeAndre Ayton play? Just because if he's dealing with this back thing, you're down your 3 best players, second out of a back-to-back, tough road environment. Does it make sense? And clearly it made sense. And the Lakers decided to play him, and that was a big factor in the win. Rui, again, 28 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block. Just continues to shoot the ball at a very high level. Would like to see him get more threes, and I think that was one of the areas where he suffered from not having the same level of penetration, driving kick game with no Luka and no Austin. Only 4 3-point attempts for him, but he 8 in the mid-range. He was taking Kamara off the dribble, pulling up on him, and that was a sight to see with Rui. Laravia, as aforementioned, 11 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, continues to be a pest defensively, 3 steals. He's been an elite defensive playmaker, among the league leaders in deflections to start the season. And on his 24th birthday, 5 of 10 shooting, didn't hit a 3. And again, surprised to see he ended up being 5th in the team in shot attempts, which I would not have expected going into tonight. I would have expected him to be like 3rd at worst, but just, for a variety of reasons, wasn't as involved offensively. Then Marcus Smart, 9 points, 5 assists, 3 steals, 5 turnovers, 3 for 11 shooting. There was the chaotic Marcus Smart tonight with some of the shots and some of the decision making, but I just love watching this dude play. Like, this dude is human Red Bull, and not the sugar-free kind, just straight up, just straight to the dome Red Bull. He's just wreaking havoc on both sides, honestly, on both sides of the ball, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But I thought, again, like we saw a difference here where I think, like, comparing him to like Gabe, for example, and the only reason I make this comparison is because they're kind of in similar roles as like the secondary ball handlers. Like I thought you saw Marcus's ability to run an offense a little bit at a higher level and to figure out the different ways to attack Portland's zone and ball pressure at times. Then off the bench, Nick Smith, as I mentioned, Bronny, I thought for the second straight game, 5 points, 6 assists, hit a huge 3 at the beginning of the fourth quarter. And the passing tonight, like some of it was simple reads, but he's also mixed in some higher level reads. And I would say back-to-back games of him, like his best games as a Laker, and him looking more like an NBA caliber rotation player, right? Like I think we need to see a larger sample size, and I still think he's more of a back-end rotation player at best in the current form. But like he's gone out there and played, and he's played basically the same as Vando over the last couple of games, and it's not been like, it's not stood out or been like sort of forced. Like he played more than Jackson tonight. I thought he came out and played fairly well. Vando had some of the Vando plays with 4 rebounds and a steal, a block. I thought he defended well. Jackson came in, did his thing, 4 points, 3 rebounds. Dalton, 8 points, 4 rebounds. I thought offensively got into a nice groove, attacking off of attacking closeouts off of second side stuff, getting into the mid range and rising up and scoring. Defensively was problematic again, and that's ultimately why JJ had a pretty short hook with him. I thought it was interesting that every starter was at least +8 or better, other than Dalton, who was a -10. And it just, like, he had 4 fouls. They were targeting him relentlessly. And he has started to stabilize and be more steady on the offensive end. I think the issue continues to be, like, the jury is out where he is like the glaring red target defensively for teams. And Shaedon Sharpe, Jeremy Grant, Denny Avdia, they all attacked him relentlessly and were able to get into the paint and then either, score on him or get to the rim, get fouled, or create driving kick opportunities. So he ultimately ended, he played less than Nick Smith, was right there with Vando basically in the low 20s. And then in terms of stat of the night, I mentioned 58.8% shooting, a season high for LA. Like, to shoot 59% basically without your 3 best players, without your 3 best playmakers. And if we want to throw Gabe in there, without 4 of your top 5 best playmakers, or 4 of your top 6, depending on where you slot LaRavia versus Gabe. It's just like this team has an embarrassment of riches offensively. And it's interesting because they still have not really clicked as a 3-point shooting team. I just mentioned that yesterday. They're not a high volume 3-point shooting team, and they're not a high make 3-point shooting team. They rely on relentlessly getting into the paint, getting to the rim, and just getting to the free throw line, getting to the basket for layups, drawing contact, and driving kicks, and then continuing to go into the paint, driving kick. And they've just been obviously, mixing in pick and rolls and stuff, especially more so with Luka and Austin. But like tonight, I just thought it was this relentless approach to the offensive end that generated a bunch of good looks, and also guys playing to their strengths. Like they had 9 long 2-point makes tonight, which is not the most analytics friendly, which we know is JJ's preferred approach to offense. But this group has the talent between, just looking at like who's available tonight, Ayton, Rui, LaRavia, Dalton, Nick Smith. Like they have guys who are adequate to really good mid-range shooters. And I think they played into their strengths tonight, and in general have been playing into their strengths offensively. Takeaway number 1 for me is the bench guards step up in a big way. As I said at the top, like the Lakers were closing this game, and ultimately they pulled Bronny with a few minutes left, but the 6-minute mark, 5-minute mark, and really for the rest of the game with Nick Smith, but 5-6 minute mark of this game, they have Nick Smith out there, they have Bronny James out there. The game is still in the balance, and I had no qualms with it. It was not like a forced thing where it was just because those guys were the only guys available. Like I think the first Portland matchup was a little bit more like that. Tonight, of course, still limited bodies, but they didn't have to close with those 2, right? You could have closed with Dalton. You could have closed with a little bit of a bigger lineup, but JJ was closing with those guys. And I was like, they earned it. They played that well. So I think with Nick Smith, by far his best game as a Laker. And I had said, someone asked me last night about the 2-way situations, and I was like, I think these guys have to show something here as the Lakers like continue to evaluate them and start to make a decision. This was a huge performance for Nick Smith to make a case to remain a 2-way guy, and potentially even depending on what moves the Lakers make in the future, could he make sense as a roster guy? Like I think that remains to be seen depending on how he plays. But just a statement from him. Bronny continues to look more comfortable, as aforementioned. I think his processing, his decision-making, defensively, he's getting into the ball in a way that I don't think he quite had consistently before. But then offensively, he is letting the game come to him. He is looking to shoot less, and I think that is the right approach for him. I think he's more of a second side decision maker and playmaker and an attacker, and that has played more into his strengths. It felt like at times earlier in the season, especially in the preseason, he'd be trying to force it as a scorer, where I think he's more of a role player than like a go-to guy offensively, and maybe he could be that guy in the G League, but that's not really his role at the NBA level, and that's okay. because that's 90% of players' roles at the NBA level. And I think he's looked far more like a competent role player these past couple games, which is real progress from him, because that was not the case earlier in the regular season, and that was not the case in the preseason. And even comparing the last Portland game to these two past games against Miami and against Portland, night and day difference with Bronny James. And then in Dalton, I want to give Dalton his props. Like offensively, I think he started to figure out his role as well. And I think his shot selection has been better. The threes still continue to not drop. And entering tonight, he was shooting 23% on threes. He went 0 for 3 on threes. So that percentage is going to go down and probably going to be around like 21%. It's just an insane shooting slump for a guy who JJ billed as a top 1% shooter in the NBA. We just have not seen that consistently at the NBA level yet. But I think for him, like, there's reason to be more optimistic. There's reason to be confident. He is starting to rehab his value, at least on the offensive end. Defensively, he's got to get low in his stance. He's got to find a way to better leverage his defense or his athleticism on the defensive end. He continues to be upright, gets blown by, then has to reach in and foul guys. It's just, it is what it is. I don't know if that's ever going to change, because that's just kind of been a thing his entire time at the NBA level. But maybe with more film, more reps, that'll be something that he figures out. Takeaway number 2 for me. This is going to be the one that I know a lot of fans were certainly going to want to talk about if the Lakers lost this game, but the cautious approach to the start to the season. So the Lakers decide to sit Luka and Austin. You could say rest Luka and Austin, second night of a back-to-back. I had wondered last week, remember when we were talking about Luka's potential return, if at the time it was unclear whether he was going to return for Memphis or he was going to return for this back-to-back. And I felt, especially if he returned for the back-to-back, it wouldn't have really made sense for him to play in both ends, and that he probably would have sat one end of it. Now, the fact that he played on Friday, the fact that he played yesterday, I figured that he was probably going to play tonight, and it was an important game against a formidable West opponent and a team that just beat the Lakers when they were not at full strength. So, I figured Luka was going to play. Austin, I was not aware that he suffered this groin injury. I believe it's groin or hip, groin or hip. Don't remember off the top of my head, but that he suffered that in the first quarter of yesterday's game, and that he played through that, but then the Lakers wanted to be cautious with that. So I get the fan frustration, and you guys know, like, I've been hammering this since the preseason. I've not been a fan of the cautious and conservative approach to injury management, to just load management, to guys not playing in games, guys not practicing. I've not been a fan of that. And I think it caused a missed opportunity in the preseason. I think it directly affected opening night against Golden State. And not saying they would have won had they practiced a little bit more or had a couple more games in the preseason, but I think they would have had a more competitive and stable performance against the Warriors and potentially won that game had they had more reps together. That said, I want to make a distinction here, because I do think if we take what they say at face value and Luka's continuing to manage this leg situation and Austin now suffered an injury last night, like, I think that is more justifiable to take a cautious approach with those two guys. And with Luka, you don't want to, after missing a week, you don't want to put too much stress or strain on him physically this quickly after returning. And it was like, especially the Memphis and Miami are two of the fastest playing teams in the league. And those teams are, from like a physicality and just workload expenditure, those are two of the tougher teams in the league to face. And I think playing those teams back to back into a road back to back was a tall ask for Luka. And then with Austin, apparently he tweaked this yesterday, and so they wanted to be cautious. However, this will be something we obviously monitor, and like moving forward, if they continue to rest guys on back to backs, I will have a little bit more of an issue with the process here. And it worked out tonight, but it's not always going to work out. I don't think they're going to win every shorthanded back-to-back. like, call me crazy, but that doesn't seem like a reliable formula. So I think like they got to be judicious with how they, issue these rests and who they're resting and when and stuff. But I think the bigger thing for me looking at Luka and Austin's individual workloads is Luka's averaging a career high 38 minutes per game on a career high 39% usage percentage. Austin is averaging a career high 38 minutes per game on a career high 31% usage percentage. Those four numbers all have to decline. Luka should not be having a 39% usage percentage. He should not be playing 38 minutes per game. Austin should not be playing 38 minutes per game. 31 is I think it'll naturally decline just because of LeBron. Like that one is more in line with like the 31 is a more reasonable usage percentage, but I think it probably will decline again with LeBron coming back. So at least 3 of the 4 numbers need to go down. But I'm looking at the minutes in particular as they've been playing these guys really high minute totals. And there's a reason why, I'm not the biggest fan of load management, but I am a bigger fan of reduced minutes. And I think ideally Austin and Luka should probably be more in like the 33 to 34 minute range, maybe 35 on the high side because they still are guys in their mid to late 20s. But that should probably be the cap. And there is a lot of data of certain minute thresholds, particularly the 3,000 minute mark, being a death knell for a player. And it's just that at some point you reach a certain level where your production starts to fall off later in the season and going into the playoffs. So I know like Luka's Superman, Austin has done a Superman impression to start the year, but even with their particularly with Luka, with his prior heroics, he was not playing this much and he did not have the ball this much. And I think those things, like there is a cumulative effect that it's just unsustainable. Now, I think a big part of this is because LeBron's out. So LeBron comes back, their minutes go down, the usage goes down. Okay. But I think if the Lakers are looking at ways to reduce their workload, instead of just resting them altogether, I would look for ways to trust the supporting cast a little bit more and reduce their minutes and slightly more so with Luka than Austin. Like, and by reduce, I'm talking about like 35 to or 36% usage for Luka rather than 39. Like we're talking about a small reduction here, but more in line with like his peak Dallas years rather than like a career high. Like this is not a group that he needs to have a career high usage with per se, because they have so many weapons, right? And obviously he's performing at such a high level that I get it on the one hand, but long term, if we're projecting this out, you want to keep him healthy. You want to keep him relatively fresh. And I don't think you need to put that much on his plate and save him for later in the season. Then when you get to the playoffs, then put the 39%, 40%, 41% on his plate because he's the best offensive player in the world. So I just think in general, like I get what the Lakers are trying to do. It worked out tonight. I hope they do not continue to do this. I don't agree with it long term, but I do think minutes reduction and a slight downtick in usage is a more palatable and sustainable approach moving forward. And then takeaway number 3, I want to hit on the new guys again. So new guys continue to shine. Like, I just think DeAndre, like we talked about Marcus Smart and Jake LaRavia last night. I thought tonight, again, Smart 3 steals, LaRavia 3 steals, Ayton 3 blocks. Those guys have been big defensive pieces for the Lakers. And I think, in my opinion, have really been the difference between them being a bottom 10, bottom 8 defense compared to being closer to league average. Like, I think those guys have swung the pendulum in that way with their defensive playmaking. Smart again, like Smart and LaRavia just adding 2 really respectable secondary playmakers into the rotation and like a level of basketball IQ and know-how that I don't think the Lakers quite had fully in the rotation behind the top guys last year. And then Ayton with the rolling, the finishing, the offensive rebounds. He had 4 offensive rebounds tonight. This was like definitely a revenge game for DeAndre Ayton. So I think there was a little bit something extra in addition to some of the guys being out. But I just think those guys continue to excel, and it just really highlights how great of additions those were, especially at their respective costs. Like all 3 guys have outperformed their contracts up to this point. All 3 guys look like mid-level or better players which is non-taxpayer mid-level, which is higher than the contracts they were signed for. And Ayton and Smart have the player options for next season, but Jake LaRavia, no player option, no team option. He's making $6 million next year. So that is a hell of a bargain for the Lakers with that contract. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. See, we got some super chats and some new members. Shout out to Connor Phillips here. Thank you for being a member for a month. Rooting for a team with culture is amazing. Yeah, I think the Lakers culture and the standards that JJ is holding this group to, and again, the resiliency, the problem solving, like it has been really encouraging. I don't really know another way to frame it. It's been fun to watch. This has been a really fun group to cover and to dissect and to analyze. And yeah, it's been a really fun start to the season. And outside of like the crash out that kind of happened with the Golden State loss and that situation, since then, it's been nothing but positivity and good vibes. Shopping cart, thank you for the super chat. Any update on LeBron? No update. Still hearing second to third week of November. So I think realistically, it's probably going to be coming off of the 5-game road trip. I don't think it really makes sense to throw him. Like typically guys like to come back from injury with a home game. Although Luka just came back against Memphis on the road. So, I mean, I think he'll come back when he's capable of ready to come back. But I think that's probably they have the stretch after the 5-game road trip where they come back, they play Utah at Utah, then they're home for 4 straight games, Clippers, Dallas, New Orleans, Phoenix. I think he probably, if I had to guess, it's probably the Utah game at home coming off the road trip or the Clippers game coming off of, they have a little bit of a break then at Utah, then come back against Clippers. So I think probably one of those 2 home games. It's either the 18th or the 25th. Shabugan, thank you for the super chat. Apparently he brings dominance. His name is Dominatin' after all. It's funny because I will say like Dominatin' is a real thing. Like it is like his nickname. He embraces it. And that is one of the things that people call him. And I think he has stuff around his locker that's labeled with that. So that's a thing. It's really a thing. And he was dominating tonight. And I think for me, this was also a redemption arc for him. Cause I thought Klingon got the best of him in that Portland game. Like I thought that Portland game in LA was Ayton's worst defensive performance as a Laker, including the preseason or regular season. And for a variety of reasons, it was like, Matador defense layup line at the rim. And I thought he was much better tonight. And then also won the matchup head to head with Klingon. So he was dominant. Classy K, thank you for the super chat. Is it me or does the offense look stagnant? Yes and no. I think they go through periods of stagnation. I think there's just a lot of skill with this group. And I think that some of the logic is like, just keep it relatively simple and trust that someone will be able to find a mismatch or an advantage against the defense. I think tonight it's not the best, example of the Lakers offense and how to critique it or how to analyze it just because of who was out. Like, despite how impressive this win was, I think if we saw this group for a larger sample size, like the offense would certainly get better. And I think they'd figure some things out, but like, this is obviously a much lower talent group without their 3 best players. So I think with Luka and Austin and LeBron, they are slicing the press and figuring it out at a much higher level and much quicker than they did tonight. Right. So certainly like there are some guys that this is a group that can be a little bit slower, a little bit more methodical and looking at guys like Rui and Jake and DeAndre. like those three in particular, maybe Dalton a little bit too, but like more so the first three I named. Those guys are more like methodical players in the half court. They're not playing with all this like energy and verve and just kind of pace, right? So they all kind of play at their own pace to a degree, and I think sometimes that can be reflected in the pace or the flow or the rhythm of LA's offense. It's far from perfect, and I am trying to get Kranjis to come on the show at some point here within the next week or so to discuss the offensive organization and what he's thought of LA's offense. They entered the evening 8th in offensive rating. They finished the game with a 125 offensive rating. So I guarantee that will be going up, and it will probably be somewhere close to the top 5. Let's see if it's been updated on NBA.com. They moved up to 7th. So, but tied for 6th with Charlotte technically. So moved from 8th to 6th. And Houston has a 125 offense rating. That's absurd. Philly's at 123. Denver's at 121. Then there's, so, I mean, they're right there behind Houston, Philly, Denver, Milwaukee, Chicago. So, I mean, those are all really good teams that have had really good starts. And this is also a group that's not been at full strength with their best offensive players. So certainly there are elements of stagnation, and like it can be maddening to see them play against a zone and a press. They just can sometimes make really barely getting the ball in bounds, just telegraphing passes that are obviously going to get stolen. There are some like low hanging fruit elements to the offense that can certainly be better. And even Nick Smith, like for as great of a game as he had 3 turnovers, and like at least 2 of them were egregious that he should not be making as like a third-year point guard or, combo guard, whatever you want to call him. So they can be frustrating at times, but I think overall the offenses look pretty good. Shabugan, thank you for the super chat. The fact that it's easy to forget that Gabe is out is surely not great for his future, right? Yeah, I think Gabe has been displaced in my opinion. Like I don't, for as good as Gabe can be and as good as he played in the preseason, like we saw he was a laser in the preseason, right? Like he got hot and he had the stretches where he was making everything, and that earned him the right to start. His ceiling is not touching Marcus Smart or Jake LaRavia defensively. Jake, if nothing else, just for his size and his defensive playmaking, but both guys are better, I think, just straight up like one-on-one defenders, and both guys can't be picked on size-wise the way that Gabe can be. And then both guys are better off-ball defensive playmakers, playing passing lanes, getting deflections, causing chaos. So I think it's not really his fault, and it's kind of unfortunate for him, but I think it's kind of a situation where I've made several football analogies, through the last 2 streams. Like it's kind of like the backup running back came in and took your job. Like it's just, it is what it is. Jake LaRavia and Marcus Smart are just better than Gabe Vincent. I think we thought that going into the season, but now that we have a growing sample size, I think even if Gabe is hitting shots at a high level, he still is not bringing the same level of ball handling and playmaking. And there are real size limitations, and I think just defensive limitations compared to those guys in particular. So yeah, I mean, I think at this point, he's probably fighting Vando for 8th man honors, and based on Vando's offensive limitations, it's probably going to be Gabe. But yeah, I think he probably goes from being the 5th starter to the 8th man behind some combination of Rui, Marcus, and Jake. Like all 3 of those guys have been playing really well. All 3 of those guys bring different facets to the team. And outside of shooting and being like a technically sound defender, Gabe just isn't as impactful as those 3 guys. So look, JJ could surprise us and he comes back and it's like, hey, this was the guy who was starting, let's put him back in. I personally think that would be a mistake. I'll be pretty surprised by that. And it does feel like he kind of had his role snatched. And again, it's not really like even his fault. It's just those guys are playing at a certain level that I don't think he's capable of reaching. And there's just a limitation to being a 6'2", 6'3" guard Like Marcus is Marcus is an exception because he's got 30 pounds on Gabe and he plays like a small forward. Gabe is a 6'2" point guard, and that's just tough in today's game. Nebula, be honest. Thank you for the super chat. Be honest, Buha, are we actually good or hot start? I think the Lakers are actually good. Like I will say that, they've definitely, there's been some things that are probably gone. Like, okay, so it's hard to say there's things that have gone in their favor because there's obviously things that have not gone in their favor, like LeBron not being available. Austin now missing the game, Luka missing multiple games, Marcus missing multiple games, Gabe missing multiple games, Ayton missing a game and a half. Like they've had Jackson missing multiple games. You could go down the list. Like of their top 9 guys, I believe 7 of them have like missed some stretch at some point here through the first 8 games. So they've certainly been snake bitten from an injury perspective. And that has to color any of our judgment in terms of like, just knowing that we've yet to see this group at full strength. However, I think like the Minnesota, like if we are being honest, when I looked at the schedule and like up to this point in the schedule, I thought that the Minnesota games were going to be 2 of the toughest games. And like that has not really aged out that way. Like, yes, the first one through the first like 2.5 quarters, second one, obviously what was a crunch time game, but like Minnesota's just not been playing well. And like, they have not looked like the team they were last year. They look like a play-in team right now. And that's a team that has like fallen off hard. Obviously they didn't have Ant for the second matchup, but like that, like, so the Minnesota one, for example, is like on paper, they beat Minnesota twice, but Minnesota does not look remotely close to the Minnesota of last year. Golden State was obviously a tough one to start the season. Then Memphis, it was like that. I mean, I said it on the stream before we even, like, I didn't see the Ja comments at that time. I didn't know what was about to happen, but I was like, it was a really weird second half for Ja. He was oddly passive. Jaren Jackson only had 3 shots. And those guys basically quit on the team in the second half. And then all this stuff comes out. He gets suspended. He has the post-game comments. He had the alarming comments again tonight where he basically took no accountability and was very confrontational with the media. So the Memphis situation is kind of weird. But then on the flip side is like Portland was projected to be one of the easier matchups for LA, right? And then Portland has been awesome. And like, so maybe that kind of crosses out the Minnesota stuff. So like, it's not been the toughest schedule, but I believe entering tonight, they had the 13th toughest schedule up to this point. So it's been like slightly above average from a schedule perspective in terms of like win percentage. So if you want to nitpick a little bit, you can say like, okay, they haven't played OKC. They haven't played Denver. I think the best team they played is Golden State and they lost that game. Okay, those are some of the nitpicks, but like they've also been so shorthanded that I think a lot of teams would not be 6-2 right now with this schedule and with the same players like slotted in their salary out. So I think it's really how you want to view it, but I choose to view it more bullish and more optimistically. I think this group has been really impressive to start the season, but if you want to nitpick a little bit, I think the schedule, like, it's not been the toughest schedule. They have not played OKC yet. They haven't played some of the hottest teams in the league yet, but that's coming soon, and we will have a larger sample size of what they look like then. Ruben, thank you for the super chat. Culture win, man. I'm excited to see what we can do fully loaded. Luka versus Wemby next. I'm glad you brought up that game. Wednesday's game is going to be awesome. That is partly why I want to get some rest tonight and rest tomorrow for that game. It's going to be box office, right? Like Luka versus Wemby, 2 top 5 players in the league. I think 2 top 5 MVP candidates right now, 2 top 4 MVP candidates. I think the Spurs are knocking down the door to be a top 6 seed. And it stinks for them that they just lost Dylan Harper, but they're getting De'Aaron Fox back at some point here, soon-ish. And like at full strength, I think this is going to be a really good team. And they've already been a really good team. So like playing San Antonio already, for those who want to, doubt or criticize the Lakers schedule, like San Antonio has been one of the best teams in the league, and that will certainly sway their strength of schedule up to this point. So yeah, that's a big test on Wednesday, and I'm really interested to see the chess match with the Lakers paint offense versus Wemby, because there's a dramatic Last time I checked on cleaning the glass, which was probably a couple games ago, teams were shooting like the rate of paint attempts was down 12% when Wemby was on the floor versus Wemby off the floor. So like you're not really getting into the paint. You're not really getting to the rim with Wemby out there. He can guard two people. He can guard the ball handler and the roller on the pick and roll. He's just really, he's one of the most special defensive players we've ever seen. If not, like if he can keep this up, obviously, and have the career we think, he could go down as the greatest defender or greatest defensive, just defense unto himself that we've ever seen. So ultimate test, but I do think with LA's, the one variable here is that with LA's mid-range game, with Ayton and Luka and Austin and Rui and Jake, like I think they have the weapons to attack in the mid-range, and like it's probably gonna have to be a more mid-range heavy game, but I think they have the weapons to do that. So it's gonna be an interesting chess match between their offense and the Spurs defense. Jay Hoodie, yo, Mr. 5 more minutes. Super proud of this team. A week ago, I was calling out Ayton and LaRavia, but they're definitely stepping up, give us a Herb Jones or Trey Murphy, and it's good games. I mean, yeah, if they can swing either one of those guys, and New Orleans does not have their own pick, so there's really no reason in either direction to New Orleans 0-6 with a minus 18 point differential, which is the worst in the NBA. Washington and Brooklyn are close. Yeah, I mean, Ayton and LaRavia like certainly had their, like I think more so LaRavia than Ayton. And LaRavia is more passivity in terms of like just not like deferring a little bit too much, right? And I think we've seen he's gone double-digit shot attempts in 3 of his last 4 games. That's been an encouraging sign. And then with Ayton, sometimes the catching and getting the ball stripped or going up, finesse in the paint can be a bit of an issue and was a little bit more of an issue early on in the season. But I think he's figured out a really nice rhythm in the pick and roll with just about every Lakers ball handler. Honcho, thank you for the super chat. Yo, do you think it's crazy to say Nick Smith Jr. is as fast as Fox, Prime Wall, etc.? Also, Rui's mid-range is so valuable when the offense gets stagnant. To your second point, yes. And like Rui, we had the conversation yesterday about the 5th starter and how Jake LaRavia is making a strong case for it. Obviously, I think for the most part, it's been a conversation between Rui and Smart, and we're seeing Smart play more now. I think that's been an interesting thing because one of the counterpoints to Smart potentially being the 5th starter was the minutes, but we now have his last 4 games, 31 minutes, 35 minutes, 27 minutes, 32 minutes. So they are comfortable playing him low to mid 30s. And, part of that's probably injury related to some degree. But if Marcus is capable of playing low to mid 30s, I think that is another kind of point in his favor to be the 5th starter. However, I say all that to say, Rui is making it really tough because he is shooting the ball so well. And to your point about the safety valve, like Rui popping into the middle of the floor or flashing into the middle of the floor against zone, or just when the Lakers offense is stagnating and they are dribbling out the clock, Rui can be that safety valve who has a high release point. He has a big frame. Teams will often live with putting a lesser defender on Rui. Obviously not tonight was an exception because of who was out, but like more often than not, they're prioritizing Luka first, Austin second. You're putting your center on Ayton. Sometimes you have to put a smaller guard on Rui. And if he could rise up against that guy, that is a big advantage, especially in that starting group. So he continues to make his case. Like I think defensively, there continues to be issues with him. And I think LaRavia and Smart are at a much higher level in terms of defensive impact. But his offense has been more consistent than either of theirs. And like just the shooting has been so valuable. In terms of Nick Smith Jr., I do think it's crazy to say he's as fast as Fox or Prime Wall. Prime Wall was one of the fastest players we've ever seen. Obviously, Fox is in that conversation. I'll say this. I think he's quick, and that's why he's very, very quick. And that's why I made the Jamal Crawford comparison, because Jamal Crawford, with his handle and his wiggle and the ability to manipulate screens and create separation. He had this like quickness and this burst that was unique. And that wiggle, I think Nick Smith has some of that in terms of like end to end fast explosion, super uber elite athlete point guards. I would not put him in that Fox, Wall, Rose, Westbrook, like those fast guys, right? So I mean, of course he's fast, right? And he is fast and he is quick, but I think for him, it's more the wiggle and the ability to create separation, going downhill, coming off a pick and roll. That kind of reminds me of like a Jamal Crawford-esque type. And that to me is what he profiles as in terms of like, he's a bench scoring guard. Like that is what Nick Smith is. And that is what we saw tonight. But those first couple, I get like your larger point, but I think those two guys are you know, it's hard to compare anybody to those two. Kerwin, despite the win, was hoping it would be Dalton's game. Thank you for the super chat. Yeah, I mean, I think we're now starting to see Dalton settle in as like, I think he can be someone who provides a burst of offense and you know, can have stretches of a quarter or a half where he's like a useful, like he's also kind of similar to Rui. I view him as like a safety release valve where he can hit a tough shot, a bailout shot at the end of a possession, or like just when a team's done like multiple rotations, it's like all of a sudden Dalton attacks the closeout, pulls up from 14, 16 feet, has that high release point as well, and like can get a good shot. It's just, he's not like the 3-point shot has not been there. I mean, he's literally shooting, like, if we're looking at, for comparison's sake, and this is a growing sample size going back to really the end of the regular season, but especially summer league and preseason. Looking at the guys now, let's see if it's updated. It is updated. So Dalton is shooting 20% on threes. Coincidentally, Gabe Vincent is also shooting 20% on threes, but for comparison's sake, well, we have team leader Jackson Hayes at 100% on 0.2 threes per game. But in more serious, kind of group here, Nick Smith shooting 50% on 4 threes per game, Rui shooting 45.5% on 4 threes per game, Jake at 44.4% on 3.5, Austin at 34.4 on nearly 9 per game, Luka at 29 on 12 per game, Marcus Smart at 26 on 4 per game, Bronny at 25 on 1 per game, and then Dalton at 20 on 3.5. So certainly some regression here. I think Austin will shoot better. I think Luka will shoot better. I think Marcus will shoot better. I think Rui and Jake will probably both shoot a little bit worse. I don't expect them to both be around 45% for the full season. Dalton will shoot better, but it's just like, for Dalton, for us to overlook the weaknesses and the flaws in his game, and particularly how harmful he can be defensively, he needs to be a 40% 3-point shooter. And there's just like or they need to run more offense for him. But I just think with the current offensive hierarchy, unless it's one of these shorthanded games, which I guess to your point, like could have been an opportunity for that, the Lakers trying to run offense for Dalton instead of trying to run offense for Luka or Austin or Rui or DeAndre or Jake LaRavia, like that is a less efficient proposition offensively. You are trying to like boost up the confidence of a bench player at the expense of actually trying to win basketball games. So that doesn't make sense. He has not shown an offensive ability or consistency yet to warrant that. So it's like, he's got to make do with the opportunities he has. And he just quite frankly has not done that. So like, I do think two things can be true here. He has looked better and more comfortable, particularly on the offensive end. At the same time, I don't think he has like blown us away and earned like a larger role necessarily. And like he got the start tonight, but again, he was by far the worst starter out there, and it wasn't really close, and was outplayed by, I think, both Nick Smith and Bronny tonight. So it's just, it's been a rough start to his sophomore year. And I think he's like rehabbed his value a little bit, but when we were talking about him being like a negative value versus a neutral value, I think it's still clearly a negative value. Jabba the Hutt, thank you for the super chat. Not that it's the most important thing, but to get back to a 65 plus game pace, Luka has to play 12 straight games, which is doable. Hope the caution was more of a one-off case from the staff. That's the point that I made earlier, that if this was more of a one-off of like he just came back from this injury, we want to be cautious. It's road back-to-back, then they play Wednesday, then they go out for a 5-game trip. Okay, you can kind of sell me on that, but if this becomes a thing where he's constantly missing back-to-backs, or they're constantly resting like 2 to 3 rotation guys on back-to-backs, that's when I have more of an issue with it. And again, kind of go back to some of the preseason stuff. But I think Luka should hit that 65 game mark, but obviously I don't think he's going to rest to the point where he misses the 65 game mark. What could knock him obviously is if he has another injury or a couple of like knick-knack minor injuries where he misses 3 games, 5 games, whatever. That's like 8. Now he's already missed 4. So now you're at 12. And now you can only miss a handful more of games and stay eligible for awards. So I think that's the more realistic path to him not being eligible. But as of right now, I don't think we should like assume that's going to happen. And I think for now, he projects as someone who's probably going to play in like, let's say like the low 70s in terms of games this year. Light him up. Jovan, what was your 10-game projection, and has this team surpassed your expectations in terms of the grit, fight, resiliency to win? I believe I projected them to go 6-4 over this opening stretch. So they have 2 games left versus San Antonio and at Atlanta. I think they could go 2-0. Probably most realistically would be splitting those 2, but certainly could go 2-0. So I think they're either going to go 7-3 and 8-2. So either way, I'm going to be wrong. Like I'd be pretty surprised if they lost both of these games. So to your question, yes, they have surpassed my expectations to start the season, especially like tonight's game. Like I didn't think they should have been 9.5 point underdogs necessarily, but looking at who was available and remembering like the game we just saw a week ago between these two teams, I thought they were probably going to lose this game. I'll be honest, but they won, and like they have now won probably a couple games. Like also looking at the Minnesota game was another tough one that based on who was available, look, especially to start that game, it looked like Minnesota was probably going to win it, but they've had several of these games, like even the Memphis game, right? They're down 14 at halftime and they end up winning that game rather easily. So this group, their calling card, their hallmark has been resiliency, and it's been something to behold. So yeah, the grit, fight, resiliency, it's been really encouraging to start the season. Job of the Hutt, Mavs, thank you for super chat. Mavs reporters have said that trying to convince Luka to sit out when he didn't have to never went smoothly with the staff over the years. So yeah, I agree. The best approach is to decrease usage. I mean, that's my point. And even I know some Mavericks fans or Luka fans can be a little sensitive to the talk about his usage or whatever. And it's not a critique of him or the state of the offense or whatever. My larger point is just there's a reason why like the all-time usage marks are typically in like the mid to like slightly higher than mid 30s, right? And often that's like more of a one-off, or maybe a guy has a couple years like that. Like, yes, Luka's built different. He is a usage machine, the likes of which we've maybe never seen, or very few players have ever been able to handle the type of usage that Luka can. At the same time, I just think if we are trying to be pragmatic with like the optimal way to have Luka set up to be as close to peak condition as is realistically possible late in the season, because of course there's a diminishing returns, that there is a cumulative, you talk to an NBA player, they say like, maybe you're injured to start training camp. So it's not true for everybody, but if you start training camp at 100%, the second you play that first preseason game, that first training camp practice, you're never 100% the rest of the season. Maybe you get back to 95%, maybe you get back to 90%, but you're never 100% the rest of the way, right? So like you're going to deal with some attrition here, and that's just that's normal. But my point is like, I think with Luka's current workload is the highest workload he's ever had, both in terms of minutes and usage. And I think this group is set up especially once LeBron is back. But even in the meantime with Austin, like I think they can reduce that a little bit. And that's just my point. It's a slight reduction. And if you can get him down to 35 minutes and like 36% usage, I think that's far more sustainable for the course of the season. Angelo, thank you for the super chat. So great to watch these RP rise. I think they should rest one star on either side of a back-to-back. Also, Rui plus Jake duo off the bench would be wonderful down the line. Not sure what you mean by RP here. As at first I thought you meant Rob Pelinka, but I don't think that's what you're saying here. I mean, like with LeBron, it's a little different. Like longer term with LeBron, I'm more open to him resting on back-to-backs because he's 41, year 23. We're in uncharted territory with him. He's dealing with the sciatica. It might not make sense for LeBron to play back-to-backs in his current physical condition. Like that one, I understand. With Austin and Luka, there's also exceptions here, right? Because sometimes you'll have like they've tried to eliminate it, but you'll have the like 4 games in 6 nights or 4 games in 5 nights, right? And they've tried to reduce those stretches, but like you do have some tough stretches where okay, maybe you want to rest. And this was going to be one of those stretches because it was Friday, Saturday off, Sunday, Monday play, Tuesday off, Wednesday play. So it was 4 games in 6 days. I get that. Like that is a tough stretch physically. And again, both guys are reportedly or according to the team dealing with injuries. So we will take that at face value. Long term, I'm not really on board personally with the resting healthy stars, especially in the West, because the Lakers won this game. And because of that, like we can look at the results and say, hey, it worked out, right? But right now they're 6-2. They are 3rd in the West behind OKC at 7-0, San Antonio at 5-1. But had they lost this game, they would have dropped all the way to 6th in the West. So that's sorry, 5th in the West. And it's a minor thing, right? But like that's the margins. If you go back last year, the Lakers were the 3 seed, but they were the 3 seed because they won the tiebreaker over Denver and over the Clippers. Those 2 teams also won 50 games. If the Lakers tricked off one of those games against those 2 teams, they're not the 3 seed. They're the 4 seed or they're the 5 seed. If they just lost another game in general, they would have been the 5 seed because those 2 teams would have been tied for 3 and 4. So like every game matters in the West. It's just, it's been the better conference for 25 years. There's probably going to be 5 or 6 teams that win 50 plus games this year, or at least like 49. And this is just a gauntlet of a conference. So I think that's where, like, if you're in the East, you could honestly get away with it. All right, Luka, you're off 1 back-to-back. Austin, you're off 1 back-to-back. Like, you kind of walk into a top 6 seed if you're competent in the East. And the West, it's different. It's just different. And OKC is already 7-0 and running away with the conference. Like, they're probably going to win 65 plus games. They're just a juggernaut. But like, the 2 seeds there for the taking, right? Like if the Lakers beat San Antonio on Wednesday, they're the 2 seed. They take the 2 seed spot from San Antonio. So like these games really matter. That's my point. Driven Arc, thank you for the super chat. Yo, any tips for getting into journalism? I'm a student at UCLA and would love tips. Also, add video to your Spotify uploads. On the latter point, I unfortunately upload it through Megaphone due to I have a partnership with Odyssey on the audio side, and their preferred their partnership upload platform is called Megaphone, and Megaphone does not currently support video uploads in terms of their podcast. So I've asked them about that before. That's my preference as well, would be to upload the video to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and whatnot. But that is not currently a possibility. But the second that changes, I will be making sure to add videos to Spotify. In terms of journalism, I would say test everything, right? So get some reps doing... When I was I went to USC, so we're technically rivals here, but I did grow up a UCLA fan, so I will let this pass. But in all seriousness, like when I was at USC, I did writing both for the newspaper and digital platforms. I did some work for the TV news station, doing on camera stuff, also doing some editing, and also had a radio show at our radio station. So that to me would be like in getting those reps, like you figure out what you like, what you don't like. And ultimately I decided to go down the writing path and then have made my way back into the video and audio paths. But I think you don't really know what you're good at or what you like doing until you actually try it. So I think my biggest piece of advice would be to try everything and see what sticks, what resonates, and then lean more into that. I think an aside with that is that you should be creating a bunch of content on socials across the board. Like you have X, you have Instagram, you have TikTok, you have YouTube. You can make a podcast for Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can do short form, you could do long form, you could tweet, you can write. Like you can do all these types of content just for yourself, honestly, and like your own brand and whatever you want to build publicly, forgetting even what you're doing at UCLA. So I think like leaning into those two things would be the biggest thing. Networking is huge. That's been a big part of my career, has been, for the most part, anyone that I've wanted to get coffee with, have a phone call with, I've been able to figure out a way to get in front of them and create that opportunity. So I think networking, asking people to coffee, asking people to lunch, it's always better to get an in-person opportunity or just get to know someone. And then this industry is actually relatively small, and a lot of it is built on connections. And you can be the best podcaster, you could be the best YouTuber, you could be the best tweeter, you could be the best writer, but if the right people aren't seeing it, it can ring hollow in terms of opportunity. So I think test everything out, like create as much as you can on your own. Like, if you apply for the school newspaper, you don't get it. All right, well then start a Substack, start a blog. If you apply for the school TV station and you don't get it, start a YouTube channel. If you apply for the school radio station or I don't even know if they have radio, like podcasting, whatever, you don't do it, create your own. Like I think there's a lot of problem solving you could do on your own, and then network, and then, apply to as many internships and opportunities as you can. Like get your foot in the door, try to get to a situation where you could go to a practice, where you could go to a game. Like I was doing a lot of work for free, which for some people is controversial, totally get it. But like for me, I was determined to find a way to get into an NBA practice facility, into an NBA arena. And fortunately with USC, I was really close to Staples Center and was able to get to start going to games pretty quickly. But that's my, could do a longer answer on like a mailbag, but that's my general advice. Nebula, thank you for the super chat. If I told you AR made an all-star team, but due to LeBron missing some time, would you take it? Well, I don't have a rooting interest in this part, so I guess I would not take it or not take it. I think if we are projecting a realistic way for Austin to make an all-star team, it probably is LeBron missing time, because I think if LeBron is available for the requisite amount of time, he's gonna make it. Like he's LeBron, and if only like I believe his production will warrant it. But even if it doesn't, the fan vote will carry that. He'll probably get the player vote. So like I think he'll probably be a starter if he meets the threshold in terms of like availability. And then if you have, like, I think Luka's going to be a starter. So if you have Luka and LeBron as starters, the Lakers probably have to be a top 2 or 3 seed to get a third all-star. That's certainly within the realm of possibility. And right now that's how things currently are and are trending. But like, if they slip a little bit to 4th or to 5th or to 6th, at least around the time of like the voting, it's almost, it's highly unlikely. It's just hard to get 3 all-stars in general. Like typically you have to be the 1 seed and you have to be like so far away above the rest of the conference to get 3 all-stars. Now, I'm not quite sure how the voting, I haven't really paid attention to like the US versus world voting. I think that's a different wrinkle here that changes it a little bit and probably makes it even tougher for Austin. I believe it's going to be like, if I'm not mistaken, like 15 players on each side or 16. So I think the conference stuff actually goes out the window, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not quite sure on the current they change the All-Star format every year and the voting every year. So it's hard to keep track of. I haven't really paid attention to it because we're not even at All-Star voting yet. But I think if Austin makes the All-Star team, it's likely due to LeBron not making it, because it's hard to see LA getting 3. It's possible, but it's hard. Angelo, how would you rank the new Threads favorite since the City Shack 2020? Yeah, I really like them. I like the, let me pull them up just to, I mean, I think the way that they did the shading with the name and the numbers, like it's congruent with the yellow one, obviously, and I'm more of a fan of like kind of keeping the uniforms congruent and not having these crazy ones. Definitely like them better than the previous one that had the black number. I thought that like leaning too much into the purple and black just didn't feel. I know black is like an accent color for the Lakers, or like a secondary color, like it's become more of one throughout the years, but when I think of the Lakers, I think of purple and gold, and leaning more, and even white as like a second, like kind of going back to like the Sunday whites and like the Lakers' primary jerseys until Nike took over and all this stuff started to change were purple and gold, and then white occasionally. And I'm maybe more of a traditionalist in that sense of like, that's what I prefer. So them going back to more of like the old school format or look with the jerseys, I think is something I liked. Sarah, what is the strategy against Wemby? Great question that I don't have the answer to. No, in all seriousness, like I have watched a lot of Wemby film because I did on Beyond the Block last week. I did a Spurs episode, a Wemby episode, and I went through every offensive and defensive possession he had played up to that time on Synergy, and it's like the dude's just ridiculous on both sides, because he's like a 7'6" Kevin Durant in terms of like KD. His superpower, aside from being just pure scorer and being one of the best shooters and shot makers of all time, is, or at least in my opinion, KD's super strength is like he can create a high percentage look in basically any situation. And just because he can rise up over you and you can't really contest or bother him, that is the way that Wemby is starting to play. A big shift in his game this season has been playing far closer to the basket. So first couple years in the league, he was far more of a perimeter big and like to dance a bit with the ball and like take these fadeaways and step backs and pull ups. And his 3-point rate has reduced dramatically. His average field goal attempt distance has been cut in half. So most of the time he's within 10 feet of the basket compared to previously being more of like a long 2 or even 3 guy. So he's playing closer and leveraging his size more. So I still think the most effective way to attack him defensively is with strength and like being physical with him, like kind of similar to Kevin Durant. He's obviously on the slender side. So he's gotten stronger, and I think he's gotten better at handling contact, but that's still not like a strength of his. He's not like people, and I've made the comparison to, there are shades of Giannis, there are shades of like Orlando Shaq, but he's nowhere near as strong or as like, built as those two guys, right? So he's far more the Kevin Durant body type, and almost the Kevin Durant body type, like stretched out into like a 7'5", 7'6" frame, which is just a completely insane, body. But I think defensively, you got to be physical with him. You got to be trying to push him and move him and swarm him. I think the tough thing with the Spurs is they do surround him with, the shooting is kind of shaky. So that's like the one thing you could test with them, but they do have so many ball handlers and guys who could get downhill. And then they do have like some like Vassell and Champagny can obviously stretch the floor. Harrison Barnes can stretch the floor. So like they do have some solid shooters. And I would even say Vassell is like, a pretty good shooter, but they also have guys in like a Castle or a Keldon Johnson or whatever who can attack the weak side, attack closeouts and get into the paint, get to the rim, and also make plays out of that. So like you got to be careful. And JJ has been adamant about like he doesn't really want to double. He doesn't want to send too much attention to someone. Wemby's going to test that because he can just literally turn and shoot over Ayton, over whoever. He's that big. But you got to pick your poison between like making him a scorer versus making him a passer. And I think really the biggest thing is going to be making, if you can push him out to be more of a jump shooter, I think that's a win. I also think if you can just be more physical with him and disrupt his rhythm, that's a win defensively. Offensively, you really, I think you got to just try and get him away from the basket. But like San Antonio is going to pre-switch. They're going to scram switch. They're going to find ways to keep him closer to the rim, closer to the basket. And that is just where like, he's like the inflatable dude at a car dealership where he's taking up so much space and it's like, there's only so much you could do. Right. So dude's averaging 5 blocks a game. It's just absolutely absurd. So I think you got to win the non-1B minutes. That's a big thing against the Spurs. And then I think if there are ways to stretch him now, you're not stretching him with DeAndre Ayton and you're not stretching him with Jackson Hayes. And you're not stretching him with Jared Vanderbilt at the 5. So like the Lakers aren't really equipped to, they don't have a stretch big to test him in that way. But I think the biggest thing is it's probably going to be drawing him out with like Luka or Austin and trying to see if you could then attack in like the 4-on-3, 3-on-2 situations and like leverage that to get him out of the paint. But that's going to be the chess match is San Antonio is going to try and keep him there. Braden, hope you feel better soon, Brate. Thank you for still pushing through and doing these live streams for us. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think this is an appropriate way to, or appropriate time to close. I went a little bit over, as you guys know, I love to do on here, but I can feel whatever I'm dealing with kind of rearing up right now. So I'm going to call it a night, but I will tentatively, I'm hoping to be back tomorrow. If I'm feeling better, I will do a stream and probably go for about an hour. So that'll probably be like late afternoon, some point in like the 2 to 5 p.m. Pacific time range. But if not, I will be back on Wednesday with Beyond the Block, and then of course covering Lakers Spurs, and then on Thursday Lakers Collective, and then a new episode of Buha's Block, and then Friday covering Lakers Hawks. But appreciate you all for tuning in. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I will hopefully be back tomorrow. Let's get those likes up. Let's get those subs up. Got almost 1,000 of you in here. About 40% of you who watch consistently are not yet subscribed. Takes 5 seconds. Would mean the world for me. Yes, Keon, next Lakers Collective is live. It'll be Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. We're going a little bit later because of Lakers Spurs on Wednesday night. But appreciate you all. Talk to you all soon. Shout out to the Late Night Gang.